Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Return Missionary Next Chapters podcast. I am your host, Sid Bassett. In today's episode, we sit down with Dr. Greg Hudnall, the founder of Hope Squad, a global peer-to-peer suicide prevention program that, among other things, teaches that people change with simple acts of kindness, listening, and being genuinely present. Hope Squad's mission is all about reducing suicide and fostering connection by training peer leaders to identify warning signs and safely connect them to professional help. We get to know Dr. Hudnall's journey and how this movement is actively revolutionizing mental health worldwide. You'll learn practical tools anyone can use to support others, whether you're a parent, friend, or just someone who wants to make a difference. This conversation will inspire you to act with courage and compassion. Dr. Hudnall, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great opportunity to be with you.
Could we go back to the beginning? Tell us about your younger years. Now, you grew up in Illinois. You said a small farming community. How did that early life shape who you are today?
I think it shaped me because I had a father who, at a very young age, lost his parents. He was a farmer. He knew how to work and he knew how to serve others. And so his example of living the gospel to the fullest and being of service to fellow mankind was such a great example.
Hmm.
And
So,
then
go ahead.
older siblings, and I've always been an advocate for the underdog.
Hmm.
Just to always recognize those individuals that may be struggling, and have never been afraid to reach out and to see what I could do to help.
Yeah, that's great. I assume that also includes the underrepresented over your life, and you've been willing to step into place to help those individuals as well. So,
Very much so.
have you always been a member of the church? I didn't
Was
know
in
if
all-
your upbringing was in the church or.
So I was my father had been branch president 2 or 3 times. So I went in active when I was in my teens, and then got active again, and then went on my first mission.
Hmm. Did you always know you're going to serve a mission?
No, in fact, I was working at a gas station and hadn't been to church in 5 years, 6 years, and my old scoutmaster walked in and said hi, and I didn't even recognize him at first, and I was quite embarrassed because I had my elbow on the old cigarette machines, and 2 of my best friends were working with me, and they were smoking. I never smoked, never drank, and he left, and they said, "Who was that?" And I said, "Some weirdo." And I went home and went to bed, and I couldn't sleep. I was torn, and I kept tossing, and finally I rolled out of bed and thought I was going to go get a drink of water, and I landed on my knees and I just started talking with God.
Hmm.
And it was a conversation no different like this, but telling him I was lost and feeling like I was missing something, and needed his help. And so finally fell asleep on my knees, woke up and climbed back into bed. And then next day went to work, came home. My mom was doing the dishes. My dad was sitting in a chair, and I walked in. I said, "I want to go on a mission." My father fell out of his chair. My mom about dropped her dish. And my father said, "You don't even know what a mission is." And I said, "I know." But I met with my bishop, repented of everything I needed to repent of, and then headed off. I got called to the Nevada, Las Vegas mission.
Yeah, that's great. From weirdo to hitting your knees to shocking your parents beyond belief, and then you're off to Las Vegas. All right, that's wonderful. Well, we know everything that happens in Las Vegas stays there, but could you give us a thumbnail sketch of how your mission journey went for you?
It was interesting because I didn't know how to tie a tie. And back in those days, they had you had 2 books. You had the Bible, and then you had the combination. None of them had the tabs in it. So every morning I would get up early in the mission home, and I'd get up a half hour before anybody else to do my exercises, read my scriptures, and then hurry and shower so I could slip the tie over. And at the end of the week, they gave me an award for being the most motivated missionary. And once again, I felt like a fraud. So then my first area I go to is Susanville, California. My companion, Elder Anderson from southern Utah, and he picks me up to the airport. And he goes, by the way, we're going to have a discussion before we get back to the apartment. I said, okay. And so we stop. He's doing the discussion, and he turns to me, and it was the old flip chart. And he turns to me and he goes, Elder Hudnall, will you turn to Mosiah 4? Big book or little book? And he just goes, what? And I said, is it in the big book? I didn't say the Bible, or is it? And he goes, never mind, Elder Hudnall, I'll take care of it. So afterwards we get in the car and we're driving, and he turned to me and he goes, been in the church very long? And I said, all my life. And he goes, you've been active very long? He said, about 4 months. And he goes, oh my gosh. And then 2 days later, he untied all my ties. We got into a rumbling fight. I got so angry. He pins me down, and I'm in tears because I'm so embarrassed. And he said, Elder Hudnall, he said, I will teach you how to tie a tie. And over the next 3 days, he did. He became my hero.
Hmm.
It's amazing, those heroes in your life that don't judge you, that are there to accept you and become Heavenly Father's messenger in service to someone else.
Wow. Was Elder Anderson your trainer then?
He was. He
Wow, it
was.
takes a trainer with courage to untie
And
those ties
compassion.
and compassion. I guess we all need Elder Andersons in our life to help us remember who we are. That's great.
Yeah.
So this podcast kind of started with conversations with returned missionaries and some of their struggles. Some didn't have struggles. Others had a lot of struggles just adapting to those weeks, months, and years back. Could you time travel back to those days and give us some reflections on those early days coming back from your mission?
You know, it was interesting because my family was very poor. My father, losing his parents, had to go to work on the farm during the Depression.
Mm,
So he didn't have an education past 8th grade. And so he became mechanically inclined, but never a full mechanic license. And so on my mission, we visited with Sister Nelson in Las Vegas. And every Monday night, we had a DA dinner appointment with her. And her husband had died. She owned a beauty college and would train young people to become beauticians. So every Monday night, we had a standing DA with her. And one night, we were sitting there talking during dinner, and she turned to me and she said, Elder Hudnall, where are you going to go to school after your mission? And I said, I'm going to go to a community college back home. I'd always wanted to be a police officer. My father's best friend was a county sheriff. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. And she goes, no, you're not. And I said, and I was, once again, I was embarrassed because all my companions were going to BYU, they were going to Rick's, they were very successful individuals. And she said, I want you to come over Monday night, the next day, Tuesday, when you come and meet my counselors at my university, and I want to talk to you. So we rode our bikes over. She sat down. They got all my information. Unbeknownst to me, they contacted my parents, got a copy of their tax returns, did everything. And then 3 months later, I had been transferred out to a new area. I got a call from our mission president, and he said, a Sister Nelson would like to take you to lunch. And I said, what? And he said, I've given her permission and I'm giving you permission. So she came over with her daughter, sit down with my companion and I. She hands me this manila envelope, and I open it and it says, congratulations, you've been accepted to Rick's College. And it was a Pell Grant, full tuition and books and everything. I just sat and wept. And it was amazing, the tender mercies and other people recognizing the abilities in individuals and willing to help them along their journey.
wow. For our listeners, just so they know, Rick's College was the predecessor or forerunner to Brigham Young University in Idaho. So
Right.
that's a school, and you had this Sister Nelson in your life who did all the work for you. I had a sister with no last name. It was just my sister who did all that work for me. So it's wonderful to have those people in your life who are willing to step in and say, you know what, I'm going to give you a leg up, a boost. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you received that very well. And so I guess when you came home, you went to school.
Went to school. It was the best thing that ever happened. I loved Rick's College. I had amazing roommates. We lived in a very poor section of town up by the armory, 5 mattresses on the ground in the basement. And every night we would read scriptures together and we would talk about spiritual moments. And they became amazing family. We have stayed in touch. 3 of them have passed away. 2 of us have gone on missions, senior missions, and it was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Hmm. It's amazing. Those school days, we didn't have any money. We didn't care. I remember when they came to clean our carpets, they came in not with carpet cleaners, but they came in with high-powered washers and just blew everything everywhere. I'm thinking,
Yeah,
my life has changed. But, to some people, they don't have carpets. So you take what you get and you don't throw a fit, as my granddaughter's always telling me. So
there you
that's
go.
great. I love that you had that camaraderie and that friendship with people who lifted you higher and walked along that path with you. And so it sounds like you had a number of mentors or friends in your life that helped you out. You've shared already a few: Elder Anderson, Sister Nelson, your roommates at school. Were there other mentors, maybe one or two, that helped you along your journey?
Yeah, I had an amazing individual who was the director of secondary ed at Provo City School District.
Mm,
And I was a young BYU senior. I had been the truant officer for the school district. It was a perfect job. They gave me a car. I drove around, picked up kids that were smoking and getting them back to school, went to the mall. And over a period of a year and a half, I developed a really good positive reputation with the police chief, Swen Nelson, the juvenile court judge, Kay Lindsay. And I was going to go to University of Utah, work on a master's in counseling. And one night I got a visit by the director of secondary ed and the superintendent in Provo. And they said, "We want you to stay and to become a high school principal."
mm,
And I said, "I know nothing about education except kids in trouble." And they said, "We will teach you, we will mentor you." And those 2 individuals became like fathers to me. And I was able to go back. I kept my master's in counseling in the evening. I was a high school principal during the day under the license of the superintendent. And when I finished my 2-year master's at University of Utah, my superintendent, he went to BYU Department of Secondary Ed, said, "I want you to waive half the requirements for Greg because he's already been a principal, OJT on the job training." And so this amazing individual, Rod Crockett and others, just opened up doors and avenues for me.
mm. It goes without saying to our listeners out there, um, we don't do things alone. We do things with others. And I know that there's a stigma out there that says, I'm not going to, it's who you know, not what you know. And the reality of it is, it's a little bit of both, but it's not the way people expect. And those people, it's not because you did for them or you showed up for them. You did show up for them, but those people were there in your life at the crossroads to help you go one way or another. Even back to Sister Nelson, who on her own just wanted to help you and saw something special in you. For our listeners out there, there's those people out there who see you as special. And what I'm hearing is that if you are in the right place at the right time, you will receive them into your lives and they will change you. And it's great to see for your life, Dr. Hudnall, how you've given back to others for so many years. Now, somewhere in there, you met a lovely lady who became your eternal forever companion. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Melinda, and in fact, we just celebrated our 45th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. 4
Wait a sec.
children.
I got to step in here. Now, I
Yeah,
lived next door to you for a period of time in our lives, and it was a wonderful time. We were so busy. We were both so busy. We rarely saw each other.
yeah.
One thing I would see in the morning when I would go to the park to walk, I would see you and your beloved forever companion holding hands up and down our street there. And one of the greatest memories my wife and I have was not just you sharing your love toward each other and those 47 years of love, but the days that she wasn't there, you could see you could see the beloved elder Hudnall at that time walking up and down the road with his arm in the exact same place as if he were holding the hands of his wife. His other hand was swinging normally, and his other hand was just there, almost as if she were there with him, but not present. And that was just sweetest tribute to your love for your wife. And I just want to share that with our listeners that, it's okay to give 100% to your companion and partner because they're going to help you along the way. And I assume that she's been an incredible strength and inspiration to you along the way. Am I right?
Oh yeah, she's been amazing. When I first took her on our first date, we went to the restaurant, and I got out and I started walking towards the door to go in, and I turned back and I don't see her, and she's sitting in the car. And I said, "Come on," and she just sits there and smiles. So I ran back and opened the door, and she said, "I always expect the door to be open for me." And I went, "Got it." And so she's just been a great inspiration. Another time when we were dating, she taught me, she's the great granddaughter of Hubie Brown. And she taught me so many amazing things about the gospel of faith and prayer. And we'd gone into a restaurant, ate, got up to pay, and paid, walked out, and couldn't find my keys anywhere. And I always back then had them hanging out of my back pocket. So we ran back inside, looked at the booth, couldn't find anything. And by that time, I was getting frustrated. And so I walked back out. We're looking around, can't find it. And she goes, "Why don't we pray about it?" And I said, "What, out here? I'm the return missionary, right? I'm the one that's supposed to have all of that expertise and spiritual experience." And she grabs me and pulls me into a little a alcove, and she goes, "Let's just pray." And so we prayed, and all she said was, "God, we need our keys." And so we walk around one more time, we go back in, and this lady walks in with this big fluffy coat. And I remember bumping into her when they were showing us she was leaving and we were coming. And she's standing at the counter holding my keys, and she goes, "I'm so embarrassed, but when my husband and left, these keys somehow got stuck to my coat. And when I got home and took off my coat, the keys were right there." And she said, and I walk up and I go, "Those are mine." And she apologized, and Melinda just smiled. And I went, "Oh my gosh, Heavenly Father, thank you." But our life has been that way continually. She would say, "Don't get upset, don't get frustrated. God will figure out a way for us." And it's been amazing.
Wow. Well, just to acknowledge the obvious, we have our mentors in our life, and then we have our forever companion in our life. And those are the ones who know how to politely correct, cajole, and influence us in a very positive way. And obviously, her influence on you has been spectacular. I did not know she was Elder Hubie Brown's granddaughter.
Yeah.
So maybe through epigenetics, it just flowed down through to her. So she had a
Yeah.
head start when she started in this.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
I love that. Okay, well, we're going to spend some time on you and the journey that led you to Hope Squad. We've introduced Hope Squad in the introduction of this podcast, but this is something I told you before we started recording that you are about saving lives every single day of your life. I cannot imagine a greater purpose. Unfortunately, there are times along the way where people choose another path. And so today I want to explore your journey to starting this enterprise, which is spread all around the world. And not just the numbers and stats, but just sort of what was the impetus to get you to this point, what inspired you, and then where things are now. And I may have a few questions along the way, but I think our listeners are going to be fascinated. And I hope by the end of it, they'll see this as not only a resource to help them, and also to sign up to support, but also a resource to help them in their life with their personal life, their children, their families, and others around them. Because the principles you teach are, in my mind, aligned with that of the gospel and it's trying to protect our Heavenly Father's children. And so, please, I'll let you start. Let's go back, not from the Rick's days or the BYU Idaho. But let's fast forward. Education was a part of your life. You were an assistant superintendent. You were a principal, as you've already mentioned. Now let's go from that to the starting of this incredible adventure.
Yeah, I was a high school principal in Provo, and unfortunately, the state of Utah was at that time third in the United States for suicides for ages 10 to 17. every single year in our district, we would lose 1 to 2 students, including a fourth grader who took his life on campus. Um, I lost 5 students to suicide as a principal, spoke at a couple of their funerals. My last year at the high school, I was contacted by the Provo police, and they asked if I would come down and help identify the body of a 14-year-old who had taken their life next to the school. Um, those experiences don't go away. They lock into your soul. And I can remember afterwards going to my car and just sitting there sobbing, angry that this young man took his life. So I was angry at him, and then I was angry at myself, and then I was angry at God, because this was an amazing young man. And then I made a commitment, right, that I was going to do all that I could to help prevent suicide in the future. So right after that experience, I got promoted to the district office, and we decided that we were going to. I became the director of student services. I brought my team in, and I said one of our priorities will be suicide prevention. So we trained about 8,000 adults in Provo, and because we figure parents knew their kids better than anybody. And while we did that over 5 years, but we were still losing kids. And then we had a young man walk into Provo High School, take his watch off, give it to his best friend. And he said to that best friend, "I'm not going to need this after tomorrow, and I want you to have it." And he said, his friend said, "Wait a minute, your dad gave that to you for Christmas." And he said, "I know, but my family will be better off without me." He then went on to tell 5 other friends he was going to take his life by suicide. And not one of those friends told an adult. And the next day he died. His older brother played basketball for BYU. So it just destroyed our community. So we, as a district, backed up and said, okay, we're failing. We got to figure this out. So we partnered with BYU. We partnered with Wasatch Mental Health. And we partnered with Intermount Healthcare. We met every month. We looked at every single suicide prevention program around the world, with an emphasis on peer-to-peer. And we looked at what New Zealand, Australia, we looked at Japan, we looked at South Korea, we looked at Europe. Then we came back to, and every time we would see something, there were pieces of it that would go, oh, that may work, but most of it wouldn't because of our culture, because we're so unique and so different. And so finally we had all of these pieces, and it was about 3 to 4 years that we spent really doing our due diligence. And then Director of Psychiatry Care, Dr. Ken Tuttle for Intermountain Healthcare, he said, Greg, let's try it. We've got the pieces. And I remember going, no, because I was so afraid it wouldn't work. So he said, let's look at all your schools in Provo and what's ground zero. And it happened to be Timpview High School, right next to BYU. It's where Elder Holland's kids went to school, Steve Young, Steve Covey. It was the who's who of the schools. And more kids from that school go to Ivy League schools than any other school in the state of Utah. But it was also the school that had more threats, more attempts, more suicides than any other school. We just hit it. We hit it very well as a district and as a community. So the previous 3 years, they had 4 suicides. That's huge. So we went through every English class and we asked every young person, if you were struggling emotionally and needed to talk to someone, list the names of 3 of the peers that you would feel comfortable going to. And the most amazing thing happened, President. The same 40 names rose to the top out of 2,100. The exact same 40 names. We pulled those 40 kids together, started training them on warning signs, risk factors, self-care, boundaries, and when to go to an adult. Because what we found is 7 out of 10 young people, before they take their lives, they'll tell a friend, and that friend will never go to an adult. So we knew we needed to break that cycle. So we pulled those 40 kids together, started training them. It was so successful, we put it in every school. 13 elementaries, 3 middle schools, and 3 high schools. Previous 9 years, we had 13 suicides. We went 9 years without a suicide. 9 years. And then Timpview, 3 weeks ago, just celebrated their 22nd year without a suicide. And their Hope Squad, and they've documented it. During those 22 years, they've had over 100 kids referred for help. And it's all because of these amazing young people that are being trained. They become the eyes and ears of the school.
So let me see if I can bring this down to my level. I'm going to talk pretty clearly about this. So what you're saying is the year before at this school in Utah, I'm not from Utah, so it sounds like Timpview produced a lot of high achievers is what I'm hearing you say.
Very
And
much
they'd
so.
go to Ivy League schools. And so obviously there's a lot of academic pressure that they felt implicitly, right? So sort of even though their parents likely did not want to put that sort of pressure on them. So four young, amazing children died by suicide the year before. Now you look forward, and what you did was you went out and found all of the people who are the leaders, so to speak. Those that people would go in and talk to these people. These are the ones that would be the listening ear, the ones that would hear these stories. And then you found that you had there was 100 kids that came forward to talk to those individuals. We'll just call them the saviors, the saviors of the school
Hope
that would
Squad.
Hope Squad member who would bring that forward, and then you could do the work to help those individuals, those 100 people. Is that right?
Yeah, we call it QPR. So QPR stands for questioning, persuading, and referring. So we train these young people to recognize the warning signs. So a student sitting alone, a student pulling away, a student who has had successful grades, activities, and starts to fail, the crying, the tears. Um, I in People Magazine came out and did a story on our students, and Johnny. I got to think of the reporter's name, but he was amazing. And he said, "We're just going to interview you, Greg." And I said, "No, you got to talk to the kids." And he said, "No, they want the founder." And I said, "Fine." So we spent about 2 hours in my office here, and then I said, "Oh, Johnny, it's lunchtime." And so I said, "I'm taking you out to eat." So we got in the car, we drove about 10 minutes away, and we pull into a school parking lot. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "School lunch has improved so much." And he goes, "Greg, I told you I don't." I said, we're going to go to lunch." I'd already made arrangements with the principal and the Hope Squad advisor and the Hope Squad members. We walk into the administration conference room, and here's 35 Hope Squad members and Johnny Dodds. So Johnny sits down, they have meals for us, and students start to talk. And pretty soon, this huge football player, the principal says, "Why don't you share your story?" So this young man says, "We were in the state playoffs, and my best friend and I played defense, and he's the linebacker or safety, and he missed the ball, and the other team scored the touchdown, and we lost by 2 points. On the way back on the school bus, my friend is just crying and sobbing. We're both seniors, and he just wanted to have that championship, and he said, I might as well just kill myself." And Hope Squad member heard all those things, talked to him, got off the bus and said, "Let's go talk to Mrs. Johnson, the Hope Squad advisor, school counselor." "No, I don't want to talk to anybody." And he left in his own car. So this Hope Squad member immediately called the school counselor. They immediately got the school resource. This is Friday night, late. They got the school resource officer and school counselor to go to his home, knock on the door. Huge Hawaiian father answers the door. "Yeah, my son's downstairs. Is he okay?" "No, he's pretty upset. Can we talk to him?" And so, and the officer said, "Can I walk down with you?" So they walked downstairs, and young man had a gun under his pillow. He was going to kill himself. So they hospitalized him. And the thing that touched us all was this young man started to cry, and he said, um, "My best friend got hospitalized, and now he won't talk to me." And we all, I hadn't heard that before, and we're all just looking at him. And the advisor said, "So how are you dealing with that?" And he said, "I've come to realize that at least my friend is alive. And I pray the day that he'll come back and know I was just trying to help." Isn't that amazing?
Ah,
So we finished lunch. jump in the car. We go to Pleasant Grove High School. That was Mountain View High School. Drive to Pleasant Grove, and we sit down and have dessert. And Johnny's going, you set me up. And I said, yes, I did. I honestly did. So we sit down, and the student body president and just a girl, just a student, Hope Squad member. They were in math class. Student body's president's family was going through a divorce. He was being pitted against each other, and he had actually put a plan to kill himself by that day and had to do it before 5 o'clock. We adults think that's impossible. Kids don't. It's as they think about it. They really do. And so she reaches over. She could tell he's struggling, grabs his hand. Hey, are you okay? And he pushes it away and says, I'm fine. So she writes out a note, puts the note together, sends it over to him. He tears it up. So class is over. They're walking out. She grabs his arm and says, something's wrong, and I can tell. And he kind of pushes her away, and she comes back and says, I'm not leaving till you tell me. He starts to cry, tells her their story. They hug, walk down to the counseling center. And that student body president, handsome young man in front of the entire group, said, I would have killed myself if it wasn't for her. Holy mackerel, and that fast. And so that's what we teach young people, 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours. You hear about it and they mention it, you got to intervene. Don't wait. You got to have the courage to ask the question. Have you thought about it? Are you okay? What can I do to help?
Hmm.
So now we're in 2,100 schools around the world. We have over close to 60,000 Hope Squad members. Over 33,000 kids were referred for help and over 5,000 hospitalized this last year.
I don't want to be insensitive at all, but what does hospitalized mean to you? Does that mean that they attempted or
It's
did they? Sorry, go ahead.
it, all the above. It's either they have threatened to attempt, they have a plan, or they had attempted and didn't harm themselves but shared it with a friend.
Mm, That's too many. That's just
They,
too many. But what I'm hearing you say, first off, for the one, and I'll have you give some reflective thoughts on this, but for the one who is struggling to see what tomorrow looks like or the next hour look like, who already have a plan, say something. Yeah, reach out to somebody, say something, even if you don't trust your, the your friends, your adults, somebody's out there, say something. And what I'm hearing you say is if you hear something, you say something, or if you see something, say something.
exactly right. Top two reasons young people take their lives, President, is that number one is they feel all alone. I oversaw a crisis team for the state of Utah for 15 years, and we responded to over probably about 65 youth suicides, including one fourth grader, three fifth graders, numerous junior high and high school. Every time I would meet with the family, with the school counselor or principal, and we would visit with them, what could we have done differently? What could we have learned? We call it a psychological autopsy so that we can gather data on how we can improve. We finally got the state legislature to fund, and we have a epidemiologist for the state of Utah for every death, um, 17 and under. We do a blood sample, a hair sample. We meet with the family, we meet with church, we meet with school to better understand why this young person took their life. I was amazed when I would meet with those families, President, of the number of individuals who would say, my child was the most popular. My child was president of the seminary. My son was president of the student body, captain of the football team. Of those 60 plus youth suicides, 70% were high-end performers. It wasn't those kids on the other side of the tracks. It was families that were very prominent in their community who had no idea. Young people hide it very well, the mental health. Most mental health issues began between the ages of 10 to 14. So they interview thousands and thousands of adults who have tried to kill themselves. And when they go into the hospital or the psych unit, part of the process is they survey and ask them, at what age did you notice that you started to struggle? and ages 10 to 14 rise to the top. So we know the more we can intervene at that age group, it's because it doesn't become full blown dysthymia, schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever until later on, 18, 19, 20, 25, whatever. But what we know is most of those illnesses begin at that young age. And those young people don't understand what they're going through. They don't understand the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the psychological sides of it. And so it can be very, very difficult.
Well, as a fellow mental health practitioner, I can tell you that when you're around this, well, we know about mandatory reporting. We know about listening and watching for those signs. We have a sense for that. We've had clients, you and I have had clients we've had to watch and observe over time. But there are so many out there who really have been impacted, but they don't know exactly what to do. So, practically, if you're sitting down with somebody right now who's listening to this, who sees signs or have heard something or know of somebody with a plan, let's talk about the resource first. You know about a plan. They're not in school, so they're older and they know of somebody. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, the first thing that I share with people is to have that difficult conversation with them. And the best thing that you can do is wait for a period of time when you're not angry and they're not angry. Because too many times that mental health shows itself through behaviors that you're not used to. There are behaviors. I'll do a presentation, a Fifth Sunday presentation, and I'll have 150 parents there, and I'll go through the examples. And afterwards, I'll have 10 or 12 parents line up. And the first thing I ask is your child in junior high? Yes. How did you know? Have you seen these behaviors over a period of time? Yeah, 2 or 3 years. Okay, we're going to talk differently than mental health because what we see with mental health is their episode. It's an episode, and so it blows up, something happens. And so we train those adults when I sit down with that child is that a calm moment so that they don't do it to embarrass them, so they don't do it in front of others. One time I had parents just go for a walk. And I always tell parents, who's the closest to the child at the time? Because I have 4 kids, and when they were teenagers, each one of them, at one point, they hated me and I hated them. That's just, experiences or whatever. And so who's the closest? Is it the mom or the dad? And so that parent then has that moment when they walk away privately, go for ice cream, go for a ride, go for a walk, whatever it is, and then just sit down and to be as completely honest and non-threatening as possible. I noticed tonight at dinner when your brother asked you to pass the salt, you chucked it across the room and got up screaming and left. Son, that that scared me. I've never seen you act like that before. I always use the I message. I want you to know how much I love you and how much I care about you. And obviously there's something happening. Can you help me understand what's going on and how I can help you? So it's not you threw the salt and once again you lost your temper and I'm sick and tired of it. You. So you switch that around and it's I'm concerned and what can I do to help you? And then I have been in so many hospital rooms with young people who have tried to kill themselves. And I wait outside because I get the call from the county sheriff. They will ask me en route to go to the home with them where the body is or whatever. And, or I get the call that they're at the hospital and the intake therapist will call me and I will go in and sit down. And once the doctors are done with them, I will go in and visit with the young person. And the first thing I ask, how are they doing? Help me understand what happened and what can we do to improve as adults? What could we have done better? What didn't we recognize? And I've through the years created a list of the responses and it's amazing, President, of we get so busy as a parent, we get so rushed as a parent, and many times we don't recognize the warning signs. We don't recognize the pain that that young person is going through because I have two other kids that are struggling or whatever. And so I remember this one time I was in the hospital, spent a half hour, about 2 a.m. in the morning. I was so tired with a junior high girl, was ninth grade. And finally I was kind of trying to find a way to leave. And she grabbed my wrist. And I mean, she grabbed it tight. And she was pretty, she was bloody. I mean, they were surprised she lived. She grabs my wrist and she goes, Dr. Hudnell, you're not feeling what I'm saying. And, she was, and we both just sat there and cried because she was right on. And she talked about the challenges of feeling lost, of feeling invisible to everyone else. And she was an amazing volleyball player. She said, you know what it's like to go to school for a full week. Not one person called my name. She said, I felt invisible. My parents are going through some difficult times, and she felt that she had nobody. And that's one of the things we train Hope Squad members. I visit Hope Squads throughout the country, and I was visiting this Hope Squad, and I walked in late. It was during lunch, and they were showing a picture of a student on the wall. And the students were eating, and the advisor said, okay, this is Sally. Everybody, I want you to remember Sally. And then she clicked on the next picture. This is Danny. I want you to remember Danny. Afterwards, and what most people don't realize is we take pictures for the yearbook in September. We don't give the yearbooks out till May or June. All of those pictures are available to any teacher. And so I walked up to the advisor and I said, wait a minute, this isn't in our curriculum. What are you doing? And she said, we had a student attempt his life 2 weeks ago. And our students were so concerned. They came to me and said, we want to memorize the names of every student in our school. And she said, how are you going to do that? And they said, we're willing to give up lunches. So they meet twice a week for 30 minutes. They brown bag it, and she shows the pictures. So afterwards, I walked out in the hallway, and I happened to know the hallway monitor, the assistant principal. So I pulled him aside, and I said, I got to know, is this really making a difference? And he said, I'll tell you, last week, girl was walking down the hallway. Here comes a Hope Squad member. And I knew him as a Hope Squad member because he's also in our choir, but he wasn't wearing a Hope Squad shirt. And he passes this student and he just goes, hey, Mary, how are you? And Mary turns and looks at him like, who is that weirdo? But the minute she turned around and kept walking, she had a smile from ear to ear. And why is that? Because people knew who she was. And we've got to have more of that.
Yeah. There's people out there who are unseen. There's people out there who are unheard. And when you don't feel heard and you don't feel like you're seen, then it does feel like a very isolating place to live. And so, in anything that we can do, and I'm speaking to myself and to our listeners, anything we can do every day to help somebody feel heard and seen, that
I
may
was
make a difference.
I was an adjunct professor at BYU for 15 years, taught a graduate class for MSW and school counseling. And if you go online to rate your professor, you'll see that they rate me really well. But in the comments, and I had 42 kids in my class, in the comments, they would say, "Ooh, I hated him. He would make me close my laptop. And if you didn't pay attention, he called on every one of us in every class. I hated that." Right? Because I wanted them to know that I knew who they were.
Mm. Yeah, you take time to learn their names. I will tell you, as mission leaders, they had this app. I don't think I'm sharing anything here, but they had this app with all of their missionaries, whatever, however many there are, 150, 250. And it's a flashcard app.
Oh, I
Shows
love
their
that.
face and you try to get their name and it flips it and it turns it. And they do that because it's important for people to be seen and heard, especially by those who are put together with them to be either a leader or a friend or a counselor or advisor or something. It's so very important that people know that there's somebody out there, even if they don't like them, at least they know that they're seen by them, and that's really important. So the other thing, and I'm gonna tell on you just a little bit. You talked about the police officer who, once he knew what was going on, he stayed with this student and walked with this student. Another thing is being with people, not just talking to him even over text or over being with people is different. My wife was in a situation, a tragic situation, where she was swimming as she does every morning, and there was a student who he didn't intentionally take his life. It was absolutely not intentional, but his life ended within a few feet of where she was, and she had to go through that and process that. And I'll never forget, within just a very short period of time of you knowing that there were these people involved in that situation, you were there present. You didn't call on the phone, you didn't send a text, "Hey, if you need anything, give me a." You were just there, and I remember you screaming in the car, the parking lot. You didn't even park straight, I don't think, in the lines. You just wanted to be there to help somebody who needed to share, needed to process, needed to go and work through that one, and I think that's a good example for all of us. You don't have to be a PhD who's trained, who's got thousands of people out there who have been taught by you. You need to be somebody who's just willing to look and listen, follow the spirit, follow promptings. Obviously don't feel that weight if somebody does take their life, but to the extent that you do feel those promptings, just reach out and say something. They're going to feel heard and seen, even if you say anything or something. And then I love this imagery of you being there, and I'll never forget that. Just be there. You don't have to say anything, but if you're there and they know you're there, just to listen, just to let them say what they need to say and process what they need to process. I think that is so very important. What more would you say about that?
Well, I would say Melinda is the master of that. She immediately, I was off working with some students. She immediately met with the lifeguards and spent a lot of time with them over the next couple of months. She would check in with them once or twice a week, just to make sure that they were still okay. Because in those situations, there is the blame game and other things, and it's what we've learned through the years that these young people continually tell us when we meet with kids in crisis and other things is ask the questions, but then shut up. One of the negative, I show a slide that we as parents, as adults, try to fix it. And they don't want to be fixed. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. They want to be understood. And they want someone to help them understand what they're going through. And so it's a process, but they don't they don't want the quick fix. And when we come in and try to do that, then it becomes dismissive. And they go, okay, you really don't care. You're just another adult.
Yeah. That great clip of it's not about the nail. If you haven't seen that, I encourage you to
Yeah.
go look that up. Maybe we'll put that in the notes along with the Hope Squad information for people to know where to turn. But if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to see it. If you have seen it, you know what I'm going to say. The first time I saw that many years ago, I'm the guy. I'm seeing, get the nail out of your head. And, that's why your sweater. And, as I've gone through my own journey of understanding and being more empathetic toward individuals, I get it. Just like you said, it's not about the nail. It's about listening. It's about being present. It's about showing up and meeting people where they're at, allowing them to express things that you don't need to judge. You don't need to give a rebuttal. You just need to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's the key. Listening is so powerful, and it's really part of that savior opportunity. We have squads in Jesuit schools, and we're in Dallas, which is the premier referral program to Notre Dame. And so, out of the blue, before we were in any Catholic schools, I got a call from the Catholic Church, and the top individual asked to meet with me. I don't think he's a bishop, but he's pretty close to that for the United States. And so I go into this complex that's huge and walk in and sit down. I'm all by myself, and in walk these three individuals that have all of their gala and everything on, and we're having lunch together, and we're eating the salad, and it's very quiet. And finally, the individual scoots his plate away, and he looks at me and he goes, "I only have a couple of questions, Dr. Hudnell." And I said, "Okay, shoot." He said, "My first question is there any hidden Mormonism in your curriculum?" And I kind of smiled and said, thinking about it for a minute. And I said, "No, sir." And I said, "All of our curriculum is reviewed by every state curriculum requirement. So every state of education has a curriculum review committee. And before that state uses it, they go through it. And trust me, Utah is very, very strict on that matter. He goes, okay. So then he asks a couple more questions. We talk about it. And then the last question he said was, tell us what you're really trying to accomplish with these kids. What are you trying them? What are you teaching them to become? And I thought for a moment, and I was touched by the Spirit. And I said, you know, what we're trying to do is to teach them to become more like our Savior. And they sat up and said, explain. And I said, we train these young people. They walk into a lunchroom, someone's sitting by themselves. They go and sit and have lunch with them. Someone has dropped something, they're the first one there picking it up. If there's a student who's being bullied, they're the one that raises their voice. They open the doors, they reach out, and then when they recognize someone really struggling, they try to get them down to the school counselor for help. And all three of them, they had their arms folded like this. They let their arms down and then they sat up and they said, when can we start? It was amazing, right? So now we're in Baptist, Presbyterian, Catholic, Christian, you name it. We're in programs around the world.
Yeah. Believers or non-believers, we
Yeah.
need to be that person because, as I said at the beginning of the show, I believe it aligns very well with the principles that we were taught by the Savior Jesus Christ. You know, if that's Mormonism, if that's something that then let's discuss it. But I don't think it is. I think it has everything to do with the life and the way our Savior taught us, and He was there for those that were, not in the privileged society. And it is interesting. I want to say this. Some of these people you talked about, a lot of those people you talked about, weren't the downtrodden per se. They were those of high privilege, and they had an incredible academic opportunities that awaited them. These are those people, right? I mean, they're. I don't think that suicidality has, a bank account. It doesn't matter how much it sits in there. It is. It's going to hit and haunt so many of us around us, and we have to be the ones ready to stable the feeble knees, to be there to help when there's a need. And I love this Hope Squad. When I heard about it, I was just amazed. I was almost emotional to think about all those people whose lives are now changed because they had somebody there. There was somebody there at the crossroad. And while they may not have heard the Spirit, they may not have heard their parents, they may not have heard, the voices that we would love for them to hear. They heard that one friend, perhaps the little boy who's leaning on the cigarette, stand
Yeah.
back years ago in Illinois.
Yeah.
They had that there for them. And bless you for your efforts, bless you for your ministry, bless you for this amazing program that you've established and spread over 2,100 schools, 60,000 people. These QPRs, that probably shirts that I now will know what they mean, when I see them. And I just really applaud you for that. So as we get down to the last couple of questions, there's one I want to ask you. As you go back in time, if you could speak to your younger self, that little boy who grew up with um, the word poor, I guess, is the only one I can use because you used it. A poor farm boy, farmer's boy in this small town of Illinois. If you could go back and talk to that person and give him advice, is the things he should consider as he moves into his adult years, what would you tell him?
I think two or three things. One is that hope is our greatest future, and that times will be tough, but we can get through that. Number two is to know that the Savior is always there, and that when we feel that we're lost, we feel that we're at the bottom of that rung, or we feel that invisibleness, that know that we're never invisible because the Savior is always there when we have the courage to reach out. One of the things we do, not only fifth Sundays, but we do youth conferences, we do training, firesides, etc. And one of the things we do is we come in and we train the parents. We do a 50-minute suicide 101. Then we ask the ward leadership, to do an anonymous survey with all the youth in the ward, to ask them about their mental health, to ask them what their concerns, what they're seeing with their peers. And then we take that information and we put a presentation together for the youth in the ward. And it's amazing the number of times these young people will come up to us afterwards and say, "How did you know? How did you know I was struggling so much? And this was so helpful. And now I know what to do about my friend," etc. And it really is about empowering. And that's what hope is all about.
Mm. So there's no taboo conversations when it comes to visiting with a friend. If you
You
feel like they're struggling, ask if they're struggling. If you feel like they may be depressed, ask if they have a plan, if they've thought of taking their life. Just be very open. Don't worry. There was a time, in our age, I'll lump you in with me here, time in
know,
our age when we didn't want to ask those questions. We were afraid, but I love you're talking to your younger self and you're saying, don't be afraid of that. Ask the questions, be there, because that's what real friends are. We don't have to hide behind a curtain. We don't have to hide behind that facade as to who people think we should be. We can just be our open, honest, vulnerable selves. Well, that's great advice. Thank you, Dr. Hudnall. And then lastly, if you were talking to a return missionary, young or old, and they were asking for advice, what would you tell them?
I would start out by telling them nothing is impossible. And while there are some realities in life, figure out what you want to do next and try to make your life so that when you look back on it, you're going to be able to feel like you made a difference. And it doesn't matter if if it's accounting, if it's, counseling, if it's administration, if it's entrepreneurship, every one of those things are amazing, but make a difference with it. I was once asked, how do I impact my school district? Every last Friday in October, we had the Hudnall Chili Cheese Dog Day. And it wasn't for teachers, it wasn't for administrators, it was for custodians, lunch ladies, bus drivers, hall monitors. And we would make homemade root beer, and I would make my famous chili cheese dog, and I would have 150 people come through, and I would personally serve them, but I would thank them. And I would tell them how important they were and how much they meant not only to me, but to us as a community, a school district community. We're all beggars, right? What does Mosiah teach us? That none of us are above anybody else. And at the end of our life, is money really going to matter? Sister Hudnall always says, you're not going to have a U-Haul tied to that coffin when you die, right? You're done. So the more that we can do with our lives now to make an impact so that other person knows that someone knows them and someone cares about them, it's amazing what we can do to make an impact.
Dr. Hudnall, Greg, friend, go back to saving lives. We love you and we appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, President. What an honor to serve with you, and bless you.
Thank you. Aloha. We hope you enjoyed today's program. It is our sincere hope that you gain insights from these lived experiences of disciples of Jesus Christ as you navigate your next chapters in life. We look forward to having you join us each week for the unfolding chapters of our guests. Remember to follow us on Instagram at RMNextChapters for announcements and updates. Also, you can visit us on our website at rmnextchapters.com, where you can listen to each podcast directly or link to your favorite podcasting platform. As always, if you have any thoughts or feedback, we'd love to hear it. Please send them to sid@rmnextchapters.com. See you soon.